Dear viewer, welcome to this program, Personal Problem Solving and Decision Making. Your presenter is Jime Nyende. In this series, we are looking at the definition of a personal problem. We have looked so far at two parts of the definition, and today we are looking at the last part, which is classifying a personal problem. We are going to do this in a slightly different manner. And so I begin by introducing to you my friend. That picture you see in the background is of a gentleman called Mr. Problem. Mr. Problem, I asked him to list down what he thinks are his personal problems. That list is important. Do you have one? I hope so. So here is the list of problems that Mr. Problem noted down. There are many. He says coronavirus outbreak, plane accidents, death of a business partner, sermons at his church are boring. Mr. Problem has financial troubles. He also says, and I'm quoting, I'm becoming forgetful. The spouse of Mr. Problem complains that he is rigid. Mr. Problem says he has poor public speaking skills. And for the last 15 years, he has been setting New Year's goals, but unfortunately, he never achieves them. Mr. Problem says he fears old age. In his country, there are forthcoming elections. He also mentions that he has a gambling addiction. Another personal problem, he easily gives up his dreams. He also notes with sadness that he has ungrateful children. He has no good friends. He also mentioned the extinction of species, both animals and plants. That is the list of Mr. Problem's personal problems. So when you have such a list, what do you do next? I want to remind you briefly that in defining personal problems, the first step is to look at the characteristics of the problem. Those characteristics will help you to say to yourself that this problem is personal or this problem is not personal. So, in that list, Mr. Problem has gone through this stage and he certifies that everything he has written down is his personal problem. Second is identification. You give a problem a name. And so the names we have seen in those lists are Mr. Problem's own work. And then the last stage is classifying a problem, ranking these problems. In other words, Mr. Problem has to sit down and write this list again in order, starting from the most powerful problem or toughest powerful problem, going down to the list. This is what we are about in this program for today. How do you rank problems if you have a list of them? Well, there are many ways of ranking problems. I want to use what I consider as the simplest method. You ask yourself 4 questions for each problem, for each personal problem you face. Ask yourself 4 questions. What are these 4 questions? Well, the first one is a simple one. What is happening? the kind of answer you should give is a description of the problem, an accurate description of how it is affecting you. Secondly, you have to ask yourself a question. Why is it happening? Now here you have to dig beneath the surface, down to the roots, and identify the principal cause of the problem. Now, if you have looked at trees, roots are always invisible. At this stage, you are looking at the invisible side of the problem. You are looking at the side of the problem that is not easily discernible with our five senses. That is why we call it an analytical question. The third question is, what is likely to happen next? Especially if this problem is not dealt with. And then the last question, what do I need to do? In my opinion, Mr. Problem has to now look at each problem one at a time and answer these 4 questions. And in doing so, Mr. Problem will have an easier way of ranking the problems, starting with the most difficult and ending with the easiest. However, answers to these 4 questions for each problem are not easy to come by. And I will explain why. Let us take a look at the problems once again. Suppose we look at the very first one, coronavirus outbreak. The question is, what is happening? Well, how is Mr. Problem going to get this information? The second question is, why is it happening? He is going to have to look underneath this problem. You will have to dig a little deeper. As I mentioned earlier on, Mr. Problem says this is his personal problem. Therefore, we believe it is his. The third question, what is likely to happen next if this coronavirus outbreak is not contained? These are questions Mr. Problem has to answer. The last one is, what do I need to do? So he has to go through each of these personal problems, answering those 4 questions. You and me know that doing such a task is not an easy one. In fact, it is a problem in itself which is not on this list. And that now brings me to something very interesting. There is an oversight that was made by this gentleman. What is that oversight? In order to answer those 4 questions for each personal problem, Mr. Problemer must have certain qualities, must have certain virtues, must have certain skills. What are those? There are 3. The first one, he must have knowledge. He must have facts and information. Now, this is not simply facts and information about the problem itself, but goes beyond what is obvious. Mr. Problem must have understanding. In other words, he must use the facts and information to derive meanings and implications. The knowledge and understanding that he must have to answer those 4 questions is indeed great. Last but not least, Mr. Problem must have wisdom. This is the ability to know what to do next. Now, Mr. Problem's oversight is this one. When he was writing the list of personal problems, he did not include the lack of these 3. He did not write that I lack knowledge, understanding, and wisdom when it comes to dealing with all the problems I am facing. Yes, one might argue that no man has all the knowledge, understanding, and wisdom that they need to solve all problems. Yes, it holds some truth, but as I mentioned earlier on, our textbook is the Bible. And when you look at the Bible and read its passages and stories, the number 1 personal problem that most of us have is the lack of knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. Not all the knowledge and understanding and wisdom that there is in the world, but a specific kind of knowledge, understanding, and wisdom that makes it possible for us to solve personal problems. What is that kind of knowledge, understanding, and wisdom? I will share with you 2 scriptures. Proverbs 9:10 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding." So this verse underlines what is most important in every person's life when it comes to problem solving and decision making. If a person lacks the fear of the Lord, then they will not have a certain wisdom. That kind of wisdom is what helps us to navigate life's problems successfully. That kind of wisdom comes from a relationship with the Lord, a relationship that is built around fearing God, respecting Him. Proverbs 2:6 explains why fearing the Lord is important. It says, "For the Lord gives wisdom. From His mouth come knowledge and understanding." The wisdom, the knowledge, and understanding that comes from the mouth of God is what helps us to answer the 4 analytical questions. And once we answer those 4 analytical questions, our problems are half solved. But if we lack the wisdom that the Lord gives, if we lack the knowledge and understanding that come from the mouth of God, it becomes difficult. In fact, it becomes impossible for us to properly deal with the 4 analytical questions. And that throws us into a loop where for each problem we try to solve, the decisions we make will always create for us bigger and more terrible problems. So, dear listener, I am encouraging you, build a relationship with the Almighty God by believing in His Son, Jesus Christ. Ask Jesus Christ, the Master Teacher, to teach you the fear of the Lord. Once you learn the fear of the Lord, you will get wisdom. You will get knowledge, you will get understanding. That wisdom, knowledge, and understanding that comes from God is what will enable you to face with courage and determination every personal problem that you have. And with that wisdom, knowledge, and understanding that come from the Lord, you'll be able to overcome your personal problems and live a fruitful life. May God bless you as you think about those words. In my next video, I want to share with you the first step you need to take to get wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. I want to emphasize one thing. This kind of wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, you will never find it in school. You will never find it amongst human beings. You only find it with God. I'll share with you that step. I encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. God bless you.